For enterprise architects, one thing that's worth considering about this pandemic is that it's essentially a very clear example of a kurtosis risk. A kurtosis risk is, otherwise known as a long tail risk, is a known unknown with apparently low probability but a very high impact. So that the effective gains that we make by ignoring the risk can be wiped out, and often vastly more, when the risk actually eventuates. And the important point about a kurtosis risk is particularly around repetition. As an individual instance, the risk may be very low probability, but when it's repeated and repeated and repeated, the risk rises quite rapidly till it becomes almost certain. And in business, we see a number of examples of this. So for example, a classic example, one of my favourites, would be customer service. When customer service is designed to essentially screw people over, you end up with, that's creating a risk. And generally speaking, it used to be the idea that if someone got annoyed, that's all that happened. But in these days with social media, you can have spectacular booby trap explosions, what I call pass the grenade sometimes, when a whole industry is doing this. The example there was the video or song United Breaks Guitars, where a singer, United Airlines had messed him around for over a year. And he said, if I was a filmmaker, I would make a film about this, but I'm not a filmmaker, I'm only a songwriter. So I'll write a song about this. Now, to save themselves about $500, and by avoiding paying the cost for the damage for the guitar that was broken, the direct cost to United was somewhere between $20 and $80 million, plus vastly more than that in reputational damage. So the individual risk of bad customer service, each instance is very small, but it compounds and compounds and compounds until suddenly one will take off. Another example was radio pranking in Australia. There's a habit on certain kinds of radio programs where they phone people up to put them down, to trick them. And this is actually a form of violence, propping oneself up by putting others down. In this case, they pranked a nurse into thinking that, a nurse in a hospital where one of the royal family was having difficulties with a pregnancy. They tricked her into thinking that this was Prince Charles talking with her. And this was really funny, it was their greatest hit and all the rest. And then the nurse committed suicide. Because she came from a shaming culture where it is beneath, it's absolutely impossible to hold face. So she died. So this happy little prank ended up being effectively, well, it cost someone their life. So these are examples of things that can blow up. Another one I dealt with firsthand was a bank in a Latin American country which had pushed out credit cards to financially largely illiterate people without telling them that they had to get the money back, pay the money back. They actually told them it was free money. The reputational damage there was so huge that they went from the most respected in the region to the least in just 6 months, to the point where their own staff were telling people that they no longer worked there. So the costs of ignoring structural issues like this can be enormous, and the more it goes on, the longer it runs, the higher the risk grows. And that's a kurtosis risk, a long tail risk. What we do to address them is we first of all identify what the factors are. And if there are factors there that are basically propping self up by putting others down, or by offloading responsibility onto others, then you know that there's a risk there. But it's fairly easy to calculate what the risk is. Generally speaking, we can't afford to ignore them. So the risk increases with repetition. The other one is, what are the mutual responsibilities, the checks and balances? You remove the risk or mitigate the risk by dealing with mutual responsibilities and working out what they are and ensuring that the checks and balances are fully in place. If you have something that's designed on propping self up by putting someone else down, or offloading responsibility onto another, These are kurtosis risks that can destroy a business. Enterprise architects need to take these risks very seriously indeed.